Hi everyone. I know you're all probably wondering where is this video, but I promise it's here. So yeah, professionalization of higher education in the 18th and 19th century. Good stuff, good stuff. Had to admit, didn't know I'd find it this interesting. All right, so basically I'm going to talk about what I read first and then talk about the other points the Professor Ryder has given us, by my understanding anyway, so should be a good time. So basically, um, during the 17th and half of the 18th centuries, educated professionals were not really existent in American colleges since they were quite similar to British universities. And young men who had just received their bachelor's degrees usually staffed these universities, and they were called tutors, which may have a reflection to the Elizabethan, tutors and whatnots. So, connection there. And it was interesting because the tutors spent about most of their time with their students that they were assigned. So they generally ate with them, slept in the same rooms as them, of course, went to class with them, and basically spent all of their time with them. And being someone who's a housing professional, that might have driven me just a little insane knowing them around the same people constantly. On top of, making sure that their not only education was in check, but also making sure that they were making the right moral decisions and growing them spiritually. So, I mean, pressure on. Um, so the students would last at about 4 years, but the professors would walk through, only last, they're not really tenured, so they would only be offered the position like 3 years. So generally it was, hi, I'm with you. Okay, don't get to see you graduate, so bye. And then they would move on to other professions. And around 1750 is when they started to go from the short-term revolving door versions of tutors and start calling themselves professors because they were more long-term. And so that started off really small with only 10, but around 45 years later, that grew from 10 to about 100. So it was gaining popularity there. Some similarities between the professors and tutors are they were supervisors of the dorms, and were definitely in charge of discipline. And some of the differences were that the professors weren't the professors were more specialized in certain topics and focused on one area of topics, as opposed to the tutors who were more centered around all kinds of information. So with the tutors, it was more like taking all of your general studies and sort of mashing them together with the specialization, but the professors were more focused on that general specialization in themselves. And so that's when it was sort of divided to where the professors would be focused on one version of subject matters compared to just all the general studies all slummed into one. And I guarantee the professors didn't spend all of their waking hours with the students. Well, I mean, let's hope not anyway. Um, the professors also had longer commitments, so it would grow greater from 3 years. And that really increased. I know you're probably wondering, like, why are all these gaps? But I'm just trying to read the notes that I made just to help all of you out. it was more towards the 19th century when everything became a little bit more secular that we sort of moved away from the religious aspect and more to the academic science aspect. And I'm going to focus on that in just a second. But a lot of students were going to Europe to learn about sciences in Germany. And so they brought those research methods back, and that led to the graduate specialization. Because right now, to up to this point, we only had the bachelorate, and this led to graduate. So that led to the professors actually gaining more education and were able to specialize in more topics as opposed to just having a basic knowledge of everything, like the tutors. And so by 1820, there were two types of faculty members. So you still sort of had like the tutor aspect to where, these were young men, fresh out of school, and they were just kind of doing this as a sort of like how we have graduate students today, as teaching assistants, really, to where they would just do it for the time they were in school. Except these guys weren't in school; they had graduated by then, but they were doing it before they would move on to a non-academic career. And so that's what I took from it, was that they were basically like professional teaching, assistants. And but the professor at this point was, like I said, post-bachelorate, one of the traditional professions. So traditional profession would be like in the church or a lawyer or medicine. And they were older, but not. I mean, I read about maybe 5 to 10 years older at most than the tutors, but this is when it sort of took on the role from where it wasn't that you could become a tutor yet and then just move on into this. This was a little bit later, but it's the beginnings of becoming a tutor and possibly becoming a professor, but only after you got some real world experience. So kind of like getting the doctorate that we have today. By 1850s, they were getting trained in more specialties in academics that led to pursuing academic careers because there was actually a need for it, and especially with the way that colleges were growing. And so in the past, these professors didn't really have a knowledge of academics, but that was changing to where it was more academic focused. So not only were they leaving the church, not really leaving the church, but leaving the religious aspect, this opened up more possibilities for those who could focus more on an academic specialization. So more towards the 1850s, they were getting trained in their specialty. So it was less, focused on like, hey, I work for the church and I'm going to teach these students. It was, okay, I'm going to teach these students because I have a specialization in chemistry. And so I'm going to pass my knowledge along. And so we're working our way towards the end, about 1860, where this is when the new instructor and assistant instructor roles were started. So instead of becoming tutors, they were becoming more, assistant instructors. So that's when the teaching assistant position finally became a thing. And by 1880, towards the end here, is when we were finally able to move on to actually having a chance of making a career path out of this. So I found that all really fascinating.